Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this session on adaptation and resilience in urban water. At COP26, there's been increasing awareness that even if we get on track to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees, we will still need to be resilient to the increasing impacts of climate change. These will be largely felt through water. Too much, too little, and too dirty. Urban water resilience is central to providing water and sanitation services, a core part of SDG 6, and protecting communities and the environment from water-related shocks and stresses. It's an essential condition for human health, a catalyst of economic development, an ingredient in urban placemaking, and an element in shared culture, heritage, and history. In this session, we will hear from cities and utilities on the role they play in resilience and adaptation in water, and the lessons that they've learned in the development of their water resilience planning. We will also hear in the second part of the session about the role of tools and approaches, financing, and capacity building supporting their progression. It is my absolute delight to welcome today our keynote from Lee Pitcher. Lee is going to talk about the role of urban water resilience in tackling the climate emergency. Lee joins us as the Managing Director of the Living with Water Partnership, as well as the Head of Partnerships at Yorkshire Water. Lee, over to you.
So, thank you very much, Louise. So I am a father, and one day I would really love to be a grandfather, and beyond that, even a great-grandfather. But of course, my message to my children is there's no rush to absolutely do that right now. Yet as excited as I am about my future generations of my family, I have this profound unease in the absolute pit of my stomach of what the world will look like that they grow up in. A world where species are dying out now 100 times faster than the normal evolutionary rate of extinction. A world where in the 44 years that I've been alive on this planet, wetlands globally have disappeared by 1/3, 3 times faster than forests. And let's remember, if forests are the lungs of our Earth, wetlands are the kidneys. But this is also a world that they'll enter, in which the air from which my children's children and their children's children will take their first breaths as they emerge into the world. A first breath that is absolutely guaranteed to be full of pollution. And that just horrifies me. That just absolutely horrifies me. But in the Humber, a place I'll talk about shortly, we firmly believe that our role is to turn the world's greatest threat, climate change, into the biggest opportunity for our future. And yes, we absolutely need the fastest degree of accelerated change that we've ever seen in the history of humankind to do that. And yes, we need to see the coming together of all of that brain power from every single inch of humankind to make that happen. But we can do it. We must do it. So now, what do we know about water and its impact? The very thing that gave us life, water, and saw us thrive so amazingly well as humans, can so very easily take that away from us, as climate change results in more and more floods and drought. In fact, the work that we've done with Arup and Siri, the Rockefeller Foundation, and many others has shown us that of the 100 resilient cities across the world, the biggest shock or stress that can affect them and their economy at any one time is the impact of too much or too little water, floods or drought. And of course, this isn't just about the economy. It's about us. It's about people. It's about our families. It's about our life. It's about the way that we live in the future. Recent research from the University of Hull that we've done has shown us how floods can impact those that have actually endured the trauma of flooding. 51% of the people that we talked to, 51% told us that they had ongoing health impacts associated with being flooded. Of those, 43% had mental health issues, and 19% reported that to be physical health. Some people had both. Now, globally, floods are the most recorded natural disaster. And the impact of water can be seen very much here in the UK too. Where I live, in the biggest county in the country, Yorkshire, and in my opinion, the most glorious of all the counties, we've witnessed the true impacts of climate change and the change in weather. In the last 3 years alone, for example, we've had 2 periods of drought, at least 5 named storm events, and we've seen 2 freeze-thaws, and of course the beast from the east. And 5 million people in Yorkshire and businesses every day rely on that water, but what they don't want is it all to come at the same time. But today I'm going to talk about the aftermath of the 2007 events and where our partnership story first began. Hull and the East Riding of Yorkshire was severely impacted by major events in 2007. Very high levels of rainfall led to surface water flooding in Hull, which damaged at least 9,000 residential properties, 1,300 businesses, and 91 out of the 99 schools in the city were impacted by that weather event. Now, the economic impact of 2007 across the country was around about 3 billion, but it's probably much, much more than that. But let me tell you a little bit more about Hull, if you don't know where it is. It's on the east side of Yorkshire. It's a beautiful city, rich history, the home of William Wilberforce, who started the abolition of slavery in our country. It's where the emergence of the Civil War first started. It's got the most amazing architecture. It's a maritime city, a city built around water, and one that thrived so much that come 2017, it became the UK's city of culture. As a result, in recent years, it's been in the top few of Yorkshire's biggest growing economic areas. It's seen huge amounts of investment in the public realm, and it has really started to prosper. Today, the Humber ports manage over 14% of the UK's international trade. It's a home for some of the big giants in the world of renewable energies, Siemens and their wind turbines, and Ørsted. It also has a really important part to play in terms of health and hygiene. It's rumoured that something like 90% of the UK's medical supplies come from the Hull area. Incredibly low, and this is the fact that really amazes me in terms of water. Hull, and via the Humber, we drain 20% of England. But for all of that great stuff, for the 300,000 population of Hull, climate change is a threat. It's a huge threat, and it's here now. But what it means for the future as well is a 1 metre sea level rise within the next 100 years. A fact that for me becomes even more scary when you can see the statistic that 95% of the city sits below high tide level. In fact, 100% of the city is within 10 metres AOD. Up to 90% of homes in Hull are at risk of flooding, and 80% of homes in the East Riding of Yorkshire Council are at threat from at least one type of flooding. And the thing about Hull is that it's affected by every source of flooding you can think of, whether that be tide, river, surface water, or groundwater coming up from the water table. But let me paint a picture of it. Please imagine Hull as a big basin. On the one side, the flood defences built up that protect the city from the Humber. On the other side, you see the wolds and the hills of the East Riding. When it rains, water from the catchment comes into Hull, or it falls directly on the basin, it starts to fill up, and there's no way for that water to escape. And even more worrying, 80% plus of that water is tapped directly, rivers, ditches, dikes, tapped straight into the sewer system. It has to be pumped out, which requires a significant amount of work, energy, carbon, and a lot of resilience on the people that are working those pumping stations. But a decade after the 2007 floods, after significant investment from all of those companies, those organisations that managed the water, Hull remained the second biggest catastrophic flood risk in the country. We needed to do more. So, in 2017, we brought together many, many people, dozens of people from across the world, from every different industry and sector you can think of, private, public and volunteering sectors, to spend 3 days to look at what do we do next. That day, or those days, generated over 200 ideas. But what is it that you do in a city like Hull to build that resilience, to start that adaptation? Well, you create a step change. You create a step change in mindset, in culture, and you do that through a statement about collaborating as one. We realised that managing water as separate organisations was no longer going to cut the mustard. It just wasn't. Water and everything around it is an ecosystem, one that has to be respected. Water doesn't recognise boundaries, and therefore, nor should we. So for the sake of our current and future generations, we become one team, one entity. The East Riding of Yorkshire Council, Hull City Council, Yorkshire Water, the Environment Agency, and now the University of Hull, to collectively manage the water as one, so that no other child should have to experience the trauma of flooding in the future. We became living with water. Now, we know that we couldn't do this alone. Recognising the importance of bringing in as much learning, both locally and globally as possible, we put in a successful bid to the Rockefeller Foundation, supported by Arup, to be part of the City Water Resilience work. A framework by which you can baseline how resilient you are to water threats and create action plans against it. We were the only city in Europe as part of that original pilot, and one of only 5 worldwide. Our approach has been one to adapt through 5 key themes. We want to reduce flood risk. We want to enhance community resilience. We want to improve the look, the feel of the place in which people live, work and thrive. We want to enhance the economy and share the knowledge. In terms of building resilience, we're looking at infrastructure that is all about using blue, green, nature-based solutions at a large scale and at community level. We call them aquagreens. And whilst we have many to build in recent months, they have held back many, many thousands of litres of water during heavy storms, protecting many hundreds of families and homes already. In terms of community resilience, we use education, and we have provided tools to both individuals and communities. We have created in Wilberforce an area where there is a great need for aspiration and inspiration, and to get children into new types of jobs, a living lab where they can learn about how to build flood plans, how to react to water when it comes into their homes if they have to, and how to bounce back from the effect of flooding very quickly if it were to happen. We've also got a cluster of PhDs at the University of Hull. And we've rolled out a Living with Water curriculum into Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 in our primary schools. It's the first time that's ever been done. In terms of improving place, we've worked with arts and culture to creatively engage people around water and the environment. Only last week, we had the Floodlights exhibition with absolutely cultured and risky cities. And 11,000 people came to see that. 11,000 people came to see exhibitions that were about water and art, and brought that together so it inspired a new generation. We also had, through sports and recreation, the world's first water-based assault course through the city centre, showcasing the place, but also showing that water can be fun and really enjoyable from a wellbeing point of view. So there's never been more questions asked of a generation than this one, our one. There has never been more requirement for us to collectively act. Hull and East Riding provides an opportunity to be an exemplar at a local and global scale, to demonstrate how through partnership working across private, public and volunteering sectors, we can make interventions that transform traditional thinking and move to a more sustainable world for managing water across our entire ecosystem. Collectively, we have a joint vision to create a blue-green plan that allows us to reduce flooding, but in doing so improve community resilience through education and co-creation, to look at new types of natural infrastructure, to enhance the general look and feel of the city, and in doing so increase the economic regeneration. But also, very importantly, learn and share that knowledge. That's why the City Water Resilience Framework is so important to us. It's been used to take us on a partnership journey. And I have to say, ladies and gentlemen and world leaders, the world's biggest threat, with the right collaboration, will become our greatest opportunity for change. We want people to no longer fear water. We want our generations in the future to thrive on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lee. We are now going to go to some videos from cities and utilities around the world talking about what urban water resilience means to them and the actions that they're taking. We'll have videos from The Hague, from Salvador, and from Samarang. Cue the videos, please.
Greetings from The Hague. My name is Oliver Hendricks. I'm the Deputy CRO of The Hague. Climate adaptation is very important for The Hague. Of course, we are concerned for flooding from the sea, but also we must prepare our city for heavy downpours. Now, just like in many other cities, our critical infrastructure is highly connected. And this may cause the problem that a disruption in one sector can lead to disruptions in others. And these cascading effects can multiply the disruption. And that's why we think it is important to review the robustness of critical infrastructure, not only sector by sector, but in an integral way. And that's why over the last 2 years, the Resilient The Hague program, we're trying to link expertise and data from parties like the drinking water company, the electricity company, our mobility services, our sewer and road services. And we developing a digital map that helps us to review the system as a whole. And by collaboratively defining our interdependencies, we can take well-informed actions to eliminate our most problematic interdependencies. Now, this initiative really illustrates that building water resilience requires a multi-stakeholder approach. And this really matches with the strong focus of the Resilient Cities Network to work across sectors of government and to create partnerships across public and private sectors. Now, as a city with a strong reputation of peace and justice, we strongly agree with the network's message that climate resilience and building water resilience is crucial for climate justice. Goodbye.
Hello everyone, I'm Ana Paula Matos, Vice Mayor of Salvador, Bahia, Brazil. I'm glad to speak with you. I'd like to start saying that climate change is a terrible threat of our time. This not only causes extreme weather events around the world, but also amplifies global challenges. Salvador is a city historically strongly marked by inequality and social vulnerability. Unfortunately, more than 45% of the population, especially in the poor areas, are exposed to climate change risks, like landslides and floods. According to the Brazil Sanitation panel, 91% of the people of Salvador has access to water, but only a little more than 81% has access to sewage collection. Now that they need to adopt public policies that put together environmental, social, and economic issues, we launched the Resilience Strategy in March 2019. It provides a climate action plan and a municipal sanitation plan. The expected result of this action is a drinking water supply service, urban cleaning, rainwater drainage, sanitary sewage, and solid waste management, designed along with the community. Salvador has done an extensive program of community engagement and the social governance improvement. So, our city has been working to reduce risks, amplify urban resilience, and promote climate justice through integrated strategic planning. Besides that, we are investing in urban requalifications using cities' resources and international funds in sites like Guerreira Zeferina and Mané Dendê, in slums and peripheral areas. understands the need for integrated city planning, which seeks for connection between social inclusion and climate justice and the engagement of the city stakeholders in the decision. The Department of Infrastructure opened the public consultation on the making of the Municipal Integrated Basic Sanitation Plan. And it's so important to build a new Salvador, a more inclusive one. We believe that this work is a constant search for synergies, understanding the urban dynamics as well as the force of an inclusive governance. We are working to make Salvador a better place to live. Thank you for having me. Bye.
Halo, Assalamualaikum. I'm Muhammad Lutfi, Chief Resident Officer of Semarang, Indonesia. In Semarang, resilient is about living in harmony with city challenges, for example, flood and subsidence, water scarcity, and also urban slum and poverty. In Semarang, we work hard to secure the future of the city in how to foster the community welfare. In Semarang, some of the challenges we face when dealing with the climate crisis include managing competing interests from the public and various stakeholders. In Semarang, we are focused on advancing towards net zero by investing in renewable energy such as solar and water, and also protecting our water bodies for clean water resources and advancing a circular economy from soil-based management. COVID-19 crisis has further exposed risks facing our city, including local economic downturn. We are addressing this challenge, planning for a resilient recovery by taking steps to ensure local economic potential being recovered by enhancing capacity for accessing resources that they need. Semarang is committed to continue a significant contribution to promote resilience across the region, nationally and globally. We are proud to be part of Resilient Network, advancing resilience locally and around the world. I look forward to identifying ways we can work together. Matur nuwun. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you very much to Semarang, The Hague, and Salvador for recording those videos, as they couldn't be with us today. Next, we're going to move to a roundtable with cities to talk about the lessons learned from resilience planning and implementation. Really delighted to be joined by Lee, but also virtually by Japheth, who's a city resilience officer in Kigali, as well as Christopher Mtonga, who's the director of public health from Lusaka. Fantastic. Starting in the room, Lee, I wanted to ask you the question. Hull and the East Riding have recently finished the development of their water resilience profile and action plan. What lessons did you learn from the development of the action plan, and how are you implementing it?
Okay, well, I mean, I suppose the first thing to say is that I've talked a lot about collaboration today and the absolute importance of that. The reason being is that the task that we have in hand is so great that we just need as many brains and as many minds around us as possible, regardless of what sector, regardless of whether that's strategic leadership or individual leadership at a community level. So for me, it's about getting as many people together at first as possible. And let's face it, there's so many passionate people out there, aren't there, around this. The problem we had was the pandemic. So the big lesson for me is actually we had to adapt in the moment. We actually had to find a way to be able to find a way to adapt from a flooding point of view. So it was really, really quite a strange place to be. And yet we did. We did. So we started to go digital. That gave us actually a unique ability to reach out to people all across the world, as opposed to just focus on maybe some people that could come to us and have face-to-face meetings. So a huge piece of learning is actually there are tools, there are techniques out there that we can use to bring people together, and we need to keep doing that now to collate all of that information and do something with it. So that was the first big piece of learning for me.
Thank you very much, Lee. And I guess a second question for you. Hull and East Riding is looking at water as an opportunity to develop a green economy and thrive. How are you approaching this?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question, actually. So I suppose the young generations are really important to us all. You know, I've just talked about the fact that there's an unbelievable amount of energy there where children want to get involved in green economy, in blue-green activity. And actually, we need to provide a way to catalyse that. So a big thing for me is how we have created an education programme in schools, in primary schools, at colleges, and at the local university as well. So for me, being able to show people the difference around a future of blue-green engineering, and how that's different from grey engineering, how that's going to create jobs in the future, and it absolutely is going to, building suds, swillies, swells, new kinds of lakes that soak up water. All of that makes a huge difference, to how we're going to manage water on the surface in the future. I suppose another project that I think is really important is how we work with agriculture as well. Yeah, so we've talked about the city, but the catchment also affects the city where I work. So we have been working with people like Birdseye, Sustainable Landscapes, and a number of farmers. So this year we had a trial where, working with 40 farmers, in between pea harvests, we put in some cover crops. Those cover crops have grown. They create these pop-up rainforests. They're amazing for pollinators and insects. But what they also do is they soak up water. So we believe for every 1% improvement in the soil organic matter, you get about 200 tons of water extra stored per hectare. So it creates this massive sponge around the city. So, but also, from a green economy point of view, there is a potential that those crops in the future could be worth something. It's a new market. So there's a win-win-win, in terms of flood resilience, carbon sequestration, which I didn't even mention, which is massively important, but also just in terms of actually it's a new economy that's emerging.
Thank you very much, Lee. I'd like to welcome Jaffe and Chris to the discussion. Jaffe, I'll go to you first. Kigali is experiencing compounded challenges of rapid population growth and climate change. How are you understanding your vulnerabilities and the opportunities to build resilience?
Thank you so much, Louise, for giving me the opportunity to share about Kigali resilient challenges and opportunities. First, starting from the challenges, we have the challenge to bridging the planning and the implementation. And there is difficulty in developing bankable programs and projects with sound cost benefit analysis and compelling cases to attract financing, particularly in terms of justifying big investments in short term. This is an issue because while planning caters to achieve long-term vision and demand of the city, implementation of large investment projects sometimes becomes unjustifiable due to the present demand that might be limited. We do have also a challenge around inadequate funding, and it's of course linked to the first challenge I mentioned. The city needs massive inflow of funding every financial year to meet the increasing demand for critical public infrastructure. However, this fund is not available in the municipal coffers. Also, due to lack of integrated planning, some of existing funding is directed towards sporadic projects, which are not based on comprehensive needs assessments and strategic plans, and thereby not effective to create long-term impact. The third main challenge linked to the two previous challenges is around limited public land that poses a major setback for implementing WASH projects. This is very critical because majority of land in Kigali is privately owned land, and the city has limited land bank, and therefore land acquisition is very costly, and in some cases the process might be long in terms of administrative and legal procedures. Now, in terms of the opportunities, there are opportunities for cities like Kigali to diversify sources of funds by exploring various and innovative financing tools, including bond markets, public-private partnerships, and water fund schemes. I wish to share two financing products or tools that Kigali is looking forward to tap into. The first is called Fonerwa, which is the Rwanda Green Fund, and also the second is the Kigali International Financial Center. Fonerwa is a vehicle through which environment and climate change finances are channeled, programmed, disbursed, and monitored. Kigali International Finance Center is a center that aims to transform Rwanda into an international financial destination for investors seeking opportunities across the whole Africa. As we develop our resilience of the Kigali water system, we are looking forward to tap into these two financial institution opportunities. And we are lucky, we are closely working with WRI in this journey. And we hope that this will help us in mobilizing the resources required to advance resilience efforts in Kigali. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Taffy. A really comprehensive explanation of the challenges Kigali faces, but also the opportunities, particularly centered on financing and funding. Chris, I'm going to go to you now. And Chris, you're a director of public health, and so I wanted to ask the question, the COVID-19 pandemic has underscored the importance of access to water for hand washing. How is Lusaka improving access to climate-related or climate resilience wash services? And are there any lessons that we can take from the COVID-19 pandemic and apply to the climate emergency?
Yeah, thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity to just share also our experiences here in Lusaka. Indeed, like you've indicated, we know that world over the COVID-19 pandemic has had its negative impacts, as it were. Mostly, I think the first one that everybody would attest to is the fact that it really heavily affected businesses, and that really affected the economies of most countries, and that the ripple effect towards the availability of maybe resources that could be used in the fights for the same, as well as just running health-related programs. That being mentioned, we've seen a rise with the coming of COVID-19. We've seen a rise in programs that are related to personal hygiene, obviously with the view to promoting good sanitation and hygiene, and with the view to advocating for behavioral change. You know, the challenge that we have mostly with the locals here is the attitude towards hygiene. So as a local authority, or as Lusaka City Council, working with other stakeholders in the city, we really intensified these programs to make sure that we have that behavioral change towards the sanitation and hygiene. And one such way we did that is through the formation of water and hygiene, water and sanitation hygiene committee at district level. We have these structures created here, which are led by obviously health professionals, But people sitting on these committees also include locally, we have the district commissioners, as well as other government stakeholders, including Ministry of Health, the private companies that are willing to offer us both financial and material support, and also just the business communities generally. So the idea is to take these programs, the WASH programs, into communities and make sure these are community driven, as they can be adopted by the members of the community at grassroots level. So what has helped us is, like I said, is the fact that we've had the community come on board, and also to make sure that the programs are community driven, thereby cultivating a sense of responsibility from them, as well as ownership of this program. And also this has also helped us have an integrated approach, in the sense that whatever resources that we have, we've had to use them prudently, as it were, because you have a number of stakeholders coming together to just make sure that we achieve the goal, which is to both create awareness and promote water, sanitation, hygiene activities. So the lessons we can learn from this, obviously, one, we've seen a significant improvement in terms of people learning the importance of water and safety hygiene, because the challenge that we have, other than the COVID-19 here locally, is the fact that we have issues of people maybe consuming water that is not contaminated, that is contaminated due to poor hygiene practices. And right now, I think with the coming of the rainy season, these activities, the WASH activities, have been intensified. We have regular interactions as stakeholders, where we just want to see how best we can bridge the gap between lack of awareness in the community, as well as resource provision, and also capacity building as regards to knowledge on how people can protect themselves. So the COVID-19 really, as it has had its impacts, but also it has also helped us see levels of I think hygiene. Because I think in the time that the COVID-19, we had the COVID-19, during the first case of COVID-19, I think we've not had any cases of cholera here in Lusaka City. I think cholera is one of the diseases that all of us might be aware of, is related to poor water sanitation hygiene. But in this period, I think we've not had it. One of the contributing factors could be that it helped enhance people's hygiene practices somehow, because of the preventive measures of the COVID-19. You know, the 5 golden rules, among which is we're saying people should avoid handshakes, as well as regularly sanitize their hands. So that is also a contributing factor. So it's something that we can learn from, and really we have seen people improve on hand hygiene. But that should not be something that should make us relax. We are still going on with the issues of WASH and WASH activities. And we also have a number, like I mentioned, we have a number of stakeholders, I think, that are supporting us with the same programs, and working hand in hand closely with the Lusaka City Council, as well as there's a water and sanitation utility company here locally, where we have a number of programs that border on making sure that water that is being supplied for consumption by the general public is free from contamination. So these programs that we have, the WASH activities that we have, comprise also members of the committee from that institution that I've mentioned, and it's helping us have a holistic or integrated approach towards the WASH activities in the city. So, and then additional to that, we've seen a situation where When it comes to issues of climate change, we have a new government in place, and it's very proactive regards to issues of climate change, in the sense that we've seen the formation of a new ministry that is in support of green economy. So we have a Ministry of Green Economy and Environment, which has basically been introduced for the sole purpose of promoting green activities in the country. But obviously this time we're talking about Lusaka. So how this ministry is helpful as well is, like I mentioned, it's basically been introduced to promote green activities, discourage issues of pollution, be it due to poor solid waste management practices, which is also another major challenge that we have here, which we're tackling in our WASH programs. Waste management, as we might be aware, is one contributing factor to pollution, really, through land pollution, and also, through open air burning, it contributes to the ozone layer depletion, and thereby contributing to the global warming, as it were. So we have the political will on our side, and also we have those structures that have been put in place to just help us deal with these issues, I think, in the midst of the COVID-19.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's a fantastic summary of the work that Lusaka is doing in relation to climate resilient WASH. I would like to thank the three speakers today, Lee, Jaffe, and Chris, for joining us from Hull, Lusaka, and Kigali. It's some really good discussion and some great topics that are brought out. If you permit me, I'll maybe pick out my three favorite topics. The first being around the importance of collaboration and integration between sectors and engaging the community. My second, from Jaffe, the role that financing plays in improving resilience in cities, and particularly cities' access to green financing. And the final one I'll take from Chris, which is the importance of behavior change and prudent use of resources. So really great discussion from them all. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Martin Schuler, who's going to lead you through the session around financing tools and approaches and capacity building.
Thank you very much, Louise, and thank you all for a fascinating opening part to this session. I'm now going to take you through to the last bit, where we're going to look at the enabling environment to help create an urban water resilient future that we all need. So it's my pleasure to introduce our panel, expert panel. We'll be looking at financing. We'll be looking at approaches to building urban water resilience and to capacity building. We've got three expert speakers who are just being queued up now. And the first speaker is Ronnie Marungu from Wateraid. Welcome, Ronnie. Hi there, Ronnie, and welcome to the panel. So my opening question really around the enabling environment. So Ronnie, you work at Wateraid. Yes. So most of the climate vulnerable communities are the world's poorest. In your view, what are the challenges for those current countries in accessing climate finance? And how does Wateraid and its partners aim to address this?
Great. Thank you very much for that question. And I think the issue of climate financing has been dominating this COP26. Almost in every session, there's a conversation around climate financing. So I think the issues that I'm going to talk to are basically more like recapping the issues that are coming in most of the sessions. And as we have rightfully said, most of the countries that are heavily affected by climate change, they are also struggling in getting financing. And if you look at the climate finance landscape, 95% of the finance is going to mitigation, and 5% is only allocated for adaptation. And all these countries are competing for that 5% on adaptation, which is really a big issue. And so the first challenge basically relates to competition. We have limited resources allocated on adaptation, and everyone is competing for that. So associated with competition is the issue of capacity. So if you look at it, not all the countries have got the same capacity in terms of how to apply and how to get those finances. Some countries are better capacitated, some are not. So for those countries which do not have capacity, they tend to lose out in terms of accessing these finances. So it's also important to highlight that in as much as we are talking around lack of capacity, we are also seeing a movement in a number of countries where governments are trying to help their public sector and also the private sector and civil society in terms of building their capacity to be able to apply for climate financing. We've seen examples in Uganda where, for example, the Ministry of Water brings together their partners around Adaptation Fund, try to review the process, and in the process, try to build the capacity of the partners. In Rwanda as well, an example is where the government brought in different partners, different stakeholders for a training on finance. So these are things that needs to be replicated across all the other countries as well. I think the other aspect that I can speak to is around the key requirements expected of countries for them to be able to access climate financing. The whole process of accreditation is not easy. It's a taxing process. It requires a lot of commitment. It requires a lot of expertise. And this is a major challenge that most of the vulnerable countries are facing. And I think that needs to be relooked at. And under this, we are not saying that we need to ease the processes and we need to make them open. We just want to make sure that they are fast enough so that countries can easily access the funds and be able to respond to emergencies. I think the other aspect I can speak to is around the NDCs and national adaptation plans. For you to be able to access funds, the issue that you intend to address should be included within the NAPs and NDCs. And we've noted that not all the issues that most of these development countries are trying to pursue were included within the NDCs and NAPs. So for example, I can say WASH. It was difficult for us to tie WASH and climate change because it wasn't mentioned anywhere within the NDCs. So that was one challenge as well. Not all sectors are covered within the NAPs and NDC, so it becomes a challenge to access funds around that. So coming to Wateraid, what are we doing as an organization? What are we doing with our partners to help countries to access funds? The first thing is through our climate and water campaign, which we started in 2020 as an organization. We've helped a number of countries to include water, sanitation, and hygiene within the NDCs and the NAPs. This is a way to show commitment from the national governments that they have commitment on water, sanitation, and hygiene, but it's also an acknowledgement that water, sanitation, and hygiene is also linked to climate change. So with water, sanitation, and hygiene mentioned in the NDCs, it provides a strong base for countries to apply for climate financing. The second initiative I can speak to, which was also launched and also talked about, particularly during this week, is the launch of the Water Resilience Accelerator, which is basically an initiative which brings together governments, which brings together development partners and also technical institutions to contribute to a 600 million grant initiative to facilitate water and sanitation and hygiene within development countries. So this initiative is running. I can highlight that it has got, we're in partnership with the UK government. The Dutch and the Swedish government have also committed to that. The African Development Bank is also part and parcel of that initiative. We have the governments of Malawi, Bangladesh, and Burkina Faso, and more initiatives and more partners are being brought on board. So we hope that this initiative will continue, and it will be a platform and an opportunity for countries to have access to climate resilient WASH financing. Then we also have this great opportunity where all these water-oriented organizations, for the first time in the history of COP, coming together to have a common voice on water and sanitation, and Wateraid is part and parcel of this. And I think my recommendation is this is a great initiative. Why can't we take this beyond COP? Because this could be a platform for us to garner more resources collectively for the benefit of the countries that are suffering. And lastly, we are enhancing our partnerships with different institutions, different private sectors. And I can also highlight the initiative that we are having with the water operators. And Yorkshire Water is one of those companies that we're in partnership with that are actually helping us to enhance resilient WASH in urban towns in East Africa. So basically, in short, these are the initiatives that we are doing in response to your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ronnie. That's fascinating. And it's great to hear the progress that the Resilient Water Accelerator is making. So congratulations to Wateraid and your partners on that. Next, I would like to invite Louise Ellis back to the platform, this time as a panelist. And Carlos as well, brilliant. Next we have Louise. Louise works for Arup, a consulting engineering company based in the UK, and is the UK Risk and Resilience Water Lead.
Thank you, Martin. If you permit me to stand so I can see my slides, that would be fantastic. So I've been asked today to talk about the city water resilience approach. This is an approach that we developed around 3 years ago. And our objective really was to develop a tool and approach that allows a city to develop, firstly, a collective understanding of their water system, and the shocks and stresses that they face. Secondly, to diagnose their water resilience vulnerabilities. And finally, to develop a collective action plan around water resilience. And in developing the city water resilience approach, we really wanted to keep these 5 core principles. Firstly, that it was inclusive and transparent, brought together different perspectives from water and city stakeholders and water and city systems to encourage collective action. The second was to be systems-based, so to take account of the interdependencies with other systems. The third one was to be holistic, so not just focus necessarily on the engineering, which is the area that we work in, but also consider leadership and strategy, planning and finance, infrastructure and ecosystems, and finally, household, personal, and community resilience. Be action-oriented. We really need to accelerate that action around climate. And finally, be scalable and global. So from towns, cities, applicable to the global context. We were very fortunate to be supported by the Rockefeller Foundation and the Resilient Shift, and to have these great project partners on board. I won't name them all, it'll take my 10 minutes up probably. We developed the city water resilience approach through a co-developing process. We worked with 8 cities around the world. As Lee mentioned earlier, Hull was one of those cities. And we engaged with around 700 people through interviews, focus groups, and workshops. And we were crucially asking them the question, what helps or hinders your urban water resilience or your ability to be resilient? As I mentioned, we initially worked with 8 cities around the world. I'm really pleased to say that that number has now grown to 15 cities around the world, 5 of which have developed and launched their water resilience action plans: Cape Town, Miami, DC, Hull, and Kigali. So a fantastic, Addis Ababa, not Kigali, they're next. So a fantastic global spread of cities in different contexts, both geographical, but also in different contexts in terms of their governance. And this is what the city water resilience approach looks like. It's a 5-step process that goes from understanding the system through assessing urban water resilience, developing an action plan, implementing it, and evaluating and adapting. As part of the city water resilience approach, there's 2 core tools. The first is a framework of qualitative and quantitative indicators. There are about 60 qualitative indicators in total, covering, as I mentioned earlier, these 4 systems of leadership and strategy, planning and finance, infrastructure and the environment, and people and communities. The other tool is called the Our Water Governance tool. And that governance tool allows us to map both the assets, but also the organizations that are involved in the water system. And in some instances, for example, Miami, there's more than 100 organizations who are involved in some way in working in the water system. Just to briefly take you through the approach, in our first step, understand the system. The city's unique context is appraised, and we do that through mapping the system in terms of its infrastructure assets, but also mapping the governance. We also seek to understand the shocks and stresses, the spatial impacts that they have as well. In the second section around assessing urban water resilience, we use the framework, as I mentioned, of indicators in a multi-stakeholder workshops to ask stakeholders where they feel like they're doing very well and areas where they feel like they could improve their resilience capacity. And essentially, we establish this baseline, which allows us to determine the areas where additional action may be required. And then we move into the exciting bit, the action-oriented bit, and we bring together those stakeholders again to work through this process of a challenge statement, understanding the root causes of that challenge, looking at what the opportunities are to improve their resilience, and then finally selecting the interventions that they're going to do and developing a program, a plan, the next steps, who are the stakeholders who should be involved, and crucially, what the benefits and the costs are so we can make that case for bankable solutions. Martin asked me the question about how we've adapted this approach, and if anything, we've had to be resilient as a project team in the development and the implementation of the city water resilience approach. When we first developed it, COVID-19 did not exist, and we were working in very large groups in multi-stakeholder workshops. We also initially, our 8 cities may be slightly shortcoming, but were largely from the global north. And so we've gone through 2 stages of adaptation. The first is adapting the indicators. And in adapting the indicators, we've tried to make them more applicable and have 5 levels to take account of the different contexts. In some cities, it's really not possible, particularly where they have low levels of resources and capacity, for them to work with 60 qualitative indicators and around 30 quantitative indicators. So we've developed these levels from essential provision of WASH through sustainable, restorative plus and regenerative, which takes us all the way from cities who may be in particularly vulnerable circumstances, all the way to those cities who are aiming for regenerative approaches to water. The second is around adapting to COVID-19, and as I mentioned, when we started this project, we could all get in a room together and have a really jolly good time having a workshop. And now that has been, over the last 2 years, much more challenging. So we've developed 3 approaches. The initial approach, the traditional approach, which we used in Miami and Cape Town, was in-person stakeholder engagement. We've, at the other end of the spectrum, undertaken a fully virtual process using collaborative platforms, and we use that in Hull and Kigali. And then in the middle, where we may not have access to great internet facilities, we've used this process of both small in-person groups with virtual facilitation and also virtual stakeholders taking part. So it really has been adaptable throughout. I'm just going to close here with a couple of key takeaways from the work that we've done. The first is that participation is key, particularly with vulnerable communities, to help them gain a shared understanding of the challenges and build a foundation for moving forward. The second is that although we've used cities as the focal point, the point of the conveners in the catchment, it's really important to take account of that wider catchment and also its governance as well. And finally, the hardest jump is this jump from strategic planning to bankable solutions. And here we found that there's a role for multidisciplinary working groups, for spatial master planning, technical advice, financing, and crucially, strong city champions like Lee and Jaffe, who you saw earlier in the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Louise. Fascinating. And building on that, our next speaker is Carlos Diaz. Welcome, Carlos, from the International Water Association. You're the head of strategic programs and the engagement manager. And if I may, I've got a question perhaps just to start us off. You're going to be talking about capacity building partnerships. So I was just wondering, so many professionals working in utilities or in cities or at the basin level are at the forefront of climate smart water management. Mm-hmm. You know, how are you equipping those professionals with skills and knowledge? So how are you making that happen? How are you building capacity?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to presenting here on behalf of the International Water Association. I am going to talk about one capacity building approach that is focusing on utilities and our utility leaders, that is named the Climate Smart Utilities Initiative, as an example of what are we doing on this topic. And to give a bit of context, right? As a professional membership association, the mission of IWA is to promote knowledge and to influence the agenda, the water agenda. And both roles are critical to boost adaptation, acceleration of adaptation, and resilience building, that is what we all are aiming for. So how does IWA do this? By harnessing the particular interests of our 8,000 active members, providing them with tools and means to partner in communities to advance knowledge and to share the lessons learned to a wider water community. And you will be interested in knowing that our utility professional membership is the second largest in our membership group. So we have a good number of utility professional and utility corporate members. And you know that these practitioners are busy with their day-to-day, delivering something tangible daily. And that is why we advance relevant topics for them with this initiative, like this one that I am going to talk a bit about, the Climate Smart Utilities Initiative. This is a legacy of the IWA partnership with GIZ on the Water and Wastewater Companies for Climate Mitigation Project, or the WACLIM project that was presented this morning, I believe. And the initiative aims to support utilities in improving, on one hand, their climate resilience, that is for us planning for adaptation, while at the same time contributing to carbon emission reduction, that is the mitigation part. This initiative is built around 4 pillars, right? And this is interesting. The knowledge generation and sharing, a web presence for external outreach, leadership, and a vision and recognition program that is like the carrot of this initiative. This last one is to encourage utilities to start paying attention to the topic, reflecting on their own situation while reporting on their journey to become climate smart, right? To date, and thanks to Corinne that started with this initiative, we have already in place the community of practices too on mitigation and adaptation, the web presence. This is for us the repository of information of the project, and is also hosting the ECAM tool that was developed as part of the WACLIN project with GIZ. And the leadership community platform for utility leaders to get peer support, direct peer support. And last but not least, we are now designing the recognition program to encourage utilities to self-reflect on their situation while reporting on their journey to become climate smart. As part of this, a vision on what a climate smart utility is, that I think it was presented a few slides ago, has been developed and in consultation with the steering committee, and has been already shared with our utility leaders for endorsement. A very brief sneak preview on the program. It will assess several components that are aligned to the vision. GHG emission management, that is based on the ECAM tool developed with the WACLIN GIZ project. Planning, especially focusing on adaptation, assessing to which extent the utility is incorporating climate-related risk into their planning for business continuity. And leadership, evaluating if the utility is playing a local, regional, or international role championing on this topic. Finally, I want to announce that we are currently working together with CDP and Aguas Andinas from Chile to incorporate the 50 to 1 billion campaign launched last Friday into our recognition program. But I want to stress that while the 50 to 1 focuses on the 50 largest water businesses, the recognition program wants to encourage all utilities, especially those from developing countries, to start reporting on their own race to resilience journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlos, and thank you very much to the panel. I think you'll all agree that what we've heard today helps create that enabling environment. So, we've looked at WASH, we've looked at vulnerable communities, we've looked at some of the tools and techniques, and we've looked at capacity building. And I think all of these things have got something in common. So I picked up a few things throughout the session. I think one of the things that I'd like to commend to the audience is really the power of collaboration and partnerships. I think you've all picked up on that, and our other speakers during the session, from cities to Lee Pitcher from Hull and East Riding, all of those initiatives really are picked up through working together in partnership with a collective view. So thank you for that. So reflecting really on the whole session, there's an element of leadership that's required, and I think we've heard today about that leadership, a shared vision. So you need to be able to articulate that vision to not just your nearest stakeholders, but to much wider communities to think about a shared future, an urban water resilient future. And then finally, just to recap, collaboration and partnerships. I think for me, that's been the most important part of the session, is really understanding that value about being open and sharing. So can I thank all our speakers today and our panelists, and thank you for making it such an enjoyable and insightful session. Thank you very much.